Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, The Boss is Away. In today's video we're going to take a look at a base fossil deck, and that base fossil deck is going to be Moltres Mill or Moltres Stall. So it's a really interesting deck from the base fossil format. You're not really aiming to take 6 prizes, you're aiming to run your opponent out of cards and win that way through mill and stall. I mean, dive bomb on Moltres, as we'll see, does 80 damage, but it's on a coin flip and it needs 4 fire energy. And as we all know, with energy removal and super energy removal in the format, it's not easy getting 4 energy on. But it is an option there, and you never know, it could come off for you, but then again it is on a coin flip. So anyway, we're going to dive into the deck profile, and yeah, we'll start off with the 3 copies of our main card here, or main I suppose I was going to say attacker, but that feels kind of weird when you're not taking prizes with it, but we are using it to implement our strategy, which is to mill, and that is Moltres here. You can see it there. Sorry about the glare there. So wildfire. So 70 hit points, and wildfire. You may discard any number of fire energy cards attached to Moltres, and when you use this attack, and if you do, discard that many from the top of your opponent's deck. So again, if you have 1 fire on, you mill 1 card off the top of your opponent's deck. If you have 2, it's 2, 3, 3, and so on. Then, as we said, dive bomb. 4 for 80, but if it's tails on a coin flip though, and if tails, it doesn't do anything. But the great thing about this Moltres card as well is that it has no weakness at all. So you can go up against rain dance decks and they aren't going to hit you for super effective damage, which is pretty nice. So yeah, that's our Moltres there. We play 3 copies of Moltres. Actually, it's very hard to see in the video, but it's a really, really nice card. So yeah, that's our Moltres, 70 hit points. We then play 4 copies of our Lickitung here. So Lickitung is, as I suppose, as this format has been played more and more in recent times, a lot of people say that Lickitung is actually the best card in the format, but at the time it was very underrated when the format was standard or current. So Lickitung is a great card. It's a basic with 90 hit points, so it's very tanky. It has colourless attack, so it's highly splashable. Its first one is Tongue Wrap, so flip a coin of heads, the defending Pokemon's paralysed, and it does 10 damage as well, which is really useful. So that getting that paralysis off is just great for stalling and building up, giving you time to build up your Moltres on the bench again. To load up some wildfire energies onto them to get maybe a 2 or 3 card kind of combo mill off, which is great. And that's actually, speaking of which, wildfire, you might only think it's only taking 2 or 3 cards, or even only 1 at a time, but you see, the thing is, in this format, it's very easy to run out of cards because we have most decks play high counts of Bill and Professor Oak, and even 1 Professor Oak. Like, sometimes your opponent just has to play a Professor Oak to get them going, and that's 7 cards down. So instantly, they're milling themselves almost there. But then if they hold on to their Oak and they don't play it, then they're kind of slowing their own game down as well. So they kind of get punished for that too. So wildfire actually does rack up nicely, and then tongue wrap here kind of lets you kind of build up a second Moltres and stall out your opponent as well, which is really good. For 2 colours we have Supersonic, so flip a coin of heads, defend Pokemon's now confused. Can be useful too, but usually tongue wrap is your go-to attack, and we play 4 copies of Lickitung. That's very good. We also play 2 copies of Chansey. So Chansey, big basic, 120 hit points, and it has Scrunch, so flip a coin, the feds prevent all damage done to Chansey during your opponent's next turn, which is just brilliant for stalling out again, getting the Scrunch off, and then building up your Moltres again. But also, even if you aren't building up your Moltres, like with Chansey in the active, your opponent's just doing nothing, so that's an extra turn where they have to draw. They either decide to play search cards, like computer searches, or bills or oaks, and that means they're taking more resources out of their deck, which means you're getting closer to your end goal of milling them, or they decide to draw past, which is still fine. You're still they're doing nothing for their turn, and it's back over to you. So it's just a great card and very hard for your opponent to deal with at times. It is weak to fighting, so if you do go against fighting decks or Hitmonchan decks with Hitmonchan in it, then it can become easier to get through, but usually it's quite a challenging card to get through. Double Edge for 4 colourless does 80 and 80 to itself. So again, you do have the option to do pretty big damage, but again, it's not really the purpose of the deck. Isn't really to take prizes. We also play 2 copies of the Invisible Wall, Mr. Mime. It's got 40 hit points. Invisible Wall, again, another fantastic way of stalling your opponent out. Whenever an attack, including your own, does 30 or more damage to Mr. Mime, after applying weakness and resistance, prevent that damage. Any other effects of attacks still happen. The power stops working while Mr. Mime is asleep, confused, or paralyzed. So again, anything that swings for greater than 20 isn't doing anything to Mr. Mime. So you might go against some decks where their Pokemon, none of their Pokemon that they have out does less than 20 damage, and then they're just stuck. Or they might have to send up like a basic Pokemon, like maybe a Charmander or a Squirtle. Well, more likely a Squirtle in Rain Dance, or maybe a Bulbasaur in Venusaur. Trying to think what other ones play small basics. There's loads. Can't really think of maybe a Growlithe in Arcanine Bazap. And so you're forcing them to attack with something they probably don't want to attack with. Then you have Meditate, which does 10 damage plus 10 more damage for each damage counter on the defending Pokemon. So you can get a bit of damage on there as well. But again, usually not what we're doing here because we're trying to mill, but it is an option for the deck as well. It depends, I suppose, on what build you decide to go with. This deck does play Psychic Energy, so again, it's just giving you that option. Sometimes it's when you can deal with a tricky Pokemon with Meditate, it's good to do it, or to take a prize. For instance, if you realise one of your Moltres is prized, you might decide, well, if I can take a knockout here to do it and maybe get that Moltres out of the prizes. So we play 2 Mr. Mime. We play 1 copy of Scyther. Scyther has Sword Stance, so during your next turn, Scyther's slash attacks base damage is 60 instead of 30, and then 3 for 30 for slash, which is colourless. Again, the real reason Scyther's here is it's a great pivot because it gives you free retreat. It's got 70 hit points, so it's fairly tanky as well. So it's just that Pokemon with that free retreat pivot. Again, you can get a slash off for 30, but it's just that, I suppose, that versatility of being able to switch in and switch out with Scyther. So we play 1 copy of it for that. And finally, the last of our Pokemon is Mew, 50 hit point Mew with the, so you're going to get the glare off that. Okay. See a little bit better there. Mew, Psywave does 10 damage for a Psychic times the number of energies attached to the defending Pokemon. So again, punishing your opponent for loading up lots of energies. Again, in this format it usually doesn't happen, but having that Psychic weakness as well is good. And the same with Mr. Mime as well. If you're up against other Mews or Mr. Mimes, or you obviously have to be careful with Mr. Mime that you're not doing too much damage, or Mewtwo is a big part in the format as well. So Mew is a great way of dealing with Mewtwo, because Mewtwo needs to load up 3 energies to attack, and then you just need 1 for Psywave, and then you're doing 10 times 3, 30, and then times that by 2 for weakness, and then you're doing 60. So it's a great way of dealing with it. We also have De-Evolution Beam. Choose an evolved Pokemon, your own or your opponent's. Return the highest stage evolution card of that Pokemon to its player's hand, and that Pokemon is no longer asleep, confused, poisoned, paralyzed, or anything else that might be the result of an attack, just as if you had evolved it. So again, the option to de-evolve, but usually it's Psywave here that we're using. But the Evolution Beam is an interesting attack and gives us a bit of diversity, I suppose, in our plays and our options. So jumping into our trainers, we are playing 4 copies of Energy Removal. So you choose an energy card attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon and discard it. This card is obviously very good in the format. It's also very annoying. which is why, you know, people tend to give out about the earlier formats, you know, because energy removal is just so annoying. But for us, I suppose, in this deck, and we're trying to stall your opponent, slow them out and mill them, it's super important. We also play 4 copies of Oak ourselves. It's just that consistency card that pretty much all decks in the format play, where you bin your hand and draw 7. And, you know, obviously we have to be careful that we never like mill ourselves too much, and that we are the ones who end up, decking out rather than our opponent. But we play 4 copies for consistency. You know, if we feel that like we've milled our opponent a nice bit, and we can afford to drop an Oak, then it's fine to do so. We just have to be careful with it, obviously, with our strategy in mind. We play 3 copies of Pokemon Center, so we remove all damage counters from all of your Pokemon with damage counters on them, and then discard all energies attached to those Pokemon. Again, it's perfect for Moltres, because Moltres' Wildfire requires you to discard your energies. So it's not like you're ever going to be losing your energies because they're gone anyway. And then it just makes your Moltres a lot tankier. With 70 hit points, it can heal it off, and then you can go again. So just a great card with Moltres. Obviously a great card with Chansey and Lickitung, because these are big basic Pokemon as well. Even Slifer to a certain degree, but definitely Chansey and Lickitung. So it just makes Chansey with 120 hit points in particular really hard to get through, and a Lickitung even more annoying when you're getting back-to-back paralysis as often. Even when like you use Pokemon Center and Lickitung's out, all it takes is 1 more energy attachment anyway to get back to using his first attack, which I believe is Tongue Wrap. So and it does 10 damage too. So we have 4 copies of our item finder, where we discard 2 cards and take a trainer back from our discard pile. So it's really, really useful card, really versatile card. So we play 4 copies of it. A card that's gotten more and more expensive as well as time's gone on as well. So I've switched to German versions of it. It's a little bit cheaper. We play a really fun card in the deck called Gambler, which is shuffle your hand into your deck, flip a coin. If heads, you draw 8 cards, and if tails, you draw 1. So, what this gives you is it's quite cool, because like sometimes you actually want to draw 1 and tails, and that, like, if it's a really tight game and your opponent's been really careful, and he's, or he or she's been really careful, and you've a large hand size, you might want to gamble back your big hand just to draw 1 card, so that you have more cards in your deck, and then you're ahead of your opponent again in the milling race. And then sometimes you want to draw your 8 cards as well, but then unlike Oak, you aren't binning those cards, you're shuffling. So you could have a current hand of 4 or 5, and then this lets you shuffle it back in and draw 8, so you haven't lost a card. So you're not milling yourself as much in that scenario. You're going to be drawing an extra 2 or 3 rather than binning your whole hand and then drawing a fresh 8. So it's a bit better than Oak in that regard, but obviously it's on a coin flip, so it really depends. Sometimes you're looking for the heads, sometimes you could even be looking for the tails as well. We play 1 copy of Full Heal, so your active Pokemon is no longer asleep, confused, paralyzed, poisoned. So just, I suppose, for the likes of your Mr. Mime, to make sure that its ability doesn't get shut down because of a status condition, and also, I suppose, if your opponent's playing Lickitung as well, it can be annoying and could paralyze your Moltres and stop you from doing what you want to do. So just 1 copy of it gives you the option of getting out of it, and then you have your item finders, 4 copies of item finder to get it back if you ever need it. But it's just nice to have the option there in the deck, especially for Mr. Mime. So we have Computer Search. We play 2 copies of Computer Search, discard 2 cards and search for any card in your deck. Pretty broken card. Again, you're committing resources to it by discarding 2 and taking 1 out of your deck, but isn't as heavy of a, it's less of a worry than an Oak in terms of milling yourself or getting your deck size lower than your opponent's. But it's just a great card. You can pick out your one-ofs, like your Full Heal or your Gambler, so it's just great. We have Super Energy Removal, and we play 4 copies of that. So by picking a Pokemon on our side of the field and removing its energy, we can then remove 2 energy off a Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field. So most of our attacks that that were used in Moltres as Wildfire is a 1 cost. Tongue Wrap from Lickitung is a 1 cost. Mr. Mime is 2. Mew is a 1. But basically, you're never really too punished by doing this, and obviously you're doing it at a time where it's going to affect your opponent in a negative way and hit them harder than it's hitting you. So it even could be a Pokemon that, you know, you could even if it's just a fresh energy you've attached onto a bench Pokemon, you can get it off straight away. Scoop Up. So we play 4 copies of Scoop Up. Choose one of your Pokemon in play and return its basic Pokemon card to your hand. So, you know, Moltres is basic, Lickitung is basic, Chansey's basic, Mr. Mime's basic, Scyther's basic, and Mew's basic. So basically, this lets us pick up all of our Pokemon, anyone you want, and put it into your hand, which is great, especially if they're kind of getting low on hit points. You scoop it up back into your hand and prevent your opponent from taking a KO. So it's a great card for that. I suppose Pokemon Trainer lets you heal more than one if there's a few Pokemon in danger of getting knocked out, and then Scoop Up's better then for recovering or for rescuing one Pokemon. It's also a nice way of getting Pokemon out of the active. Moltres does have a retreat cost of 2. Lickitung has a retreat cost of 3. Chansey, strangely, only has a retreat cost of 1. But it's just a good way of moving Pokemon out of the active as well if you need to. We play Energy Retrieval, so we play 4 copies of that. We trade one of your cards in your hand with an Energy Retrieval away, and then you pick 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile into your hand. And again, just make sure you have your energy ready to go to loop back-to-back Wildfires. So we play 3 copies of Psychic Energy just to get the possibility of Mr. Mime's immediate attack off, but mostly for our Mew as well. So it's just great to have these cards in the deck that we can facilitate using their attacks, and so 3 copies of Psychic allows us to do that, and just gives us more options as well, which is great. So then finally we play a ton of Fire Energy. We play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13 Fire Energy. So lots and lots of Fire Energy, because again, energy removal is such a big card and super energy removal in the format that you just need to play a higher count of them. You do have your retrievals as well, which is handy, but yeah, it's just good to play higher counts of them as well. And remember, the more fire that Moltres has on it, the more milling you can do with Wildfire. So that's it, guys. That's been the deck profile for Moltres Stall or Moltres Mill for the base fossil format. A really fun deck to play. Gives you a break, I suppose, from the usual Mewtwo decks that dominate the format, and kind of is nice to have a different win condition as well, other than taking 6 prizes. Another card I considered for fun as well in the deck, but I haven't included yet, is Tickling Machine. But obviously, for Tickling Machine, you'd be looking into your, I suppose, base Neo deck profiles with this, as it came out later on beyond base Fossil. But if you are thinking of playing it, the deck later on in base Neo, it's a good option. So flip a coin of heads. Your opponent sets aside all the cards in his or her hand face down. Nobody may look at those cards. At the end of your opponent's next turn, your opponent puts those cards back into his or her hand. If tails, your turn ends immediately. So if tails, your turn ends. But in certain circumstances, if you have Mr. Mime out or Chansey that's hard to deal with, and maybe you've healed it all off with a Pokemon Center, if your turn ends, fair enough, that's grand, I suppose. But then if you get it off, then your opponent then effectively his next turn, all they have is 1 card to use. So I just thought it might be an interesting way or a fun way of stalling out your opponent another turn or 2, especially if you're under pressure. Also as well, I don't know if you can see it there, but you can see it has Mr. Mime in the art, and we play a Mr. Mime, so I'm always a sucker for that kind of continuity there between cards. But again, this is only really for if you're playing base Neo, as this came out in one of the gym challenge or gym not gym challenge or gym, it's another one, I can't remember the other set, but it came out in one of those, so you wouldn't be able to use it for base fossil. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think of the deck profile. You should try it out in TCG1 as well and see what you make of it. There's a few people playing base fossil on that. I'm on it as well if you ever want to play a game. Unisonraids is my name. But that has been the deck profile for Moltres Mill. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and this has been The Boss's Way.